Every clock on every wall on Earth right now is running on math that is 4,000 years old. Nobody chose it. Nobody voted on it. You just inherited it the moment you learned to tell time. And almost nobody alive today knows why. So here's the question. What if that never happened? What if an hour never had 60 minutes at all? Let's set the rules first. Imagine a version of history where humans built time the same way they eventually built almost everything else. Decimal. 10 of this, 10 of that, 100 of the next. No 60. No weird leftover math. Just clean, round, modern numbers. The same numbers you use for money, for measurements, for practically your entire life. That's the world we're stepping into. And by the end, you'll understand why the real world never got there, even when it tried, even when it had a revolution behind it. Let's start at the beginning, because the 60 didn't come from nowhere. Around 4,000 years ago, in what is now southern Iraq, the Babylonians were doing something almost nobody else on the planet was doing at that level. Astronomy. Precise, repeated, recorded astronomy. Otto Neugebauer, a historian who spent decades studying ancient cuneiform tablets, showed that Babylonian scholars were tracking planetary movements with a level of mathematical care that wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years. And to do that math, they didn't count in tens, they counted in 60s. Why 60? Here's the part almost nobody knows. 60 isn't random. 60 is one of the most mathematically convenient numbers that exists. Think about 10 for a second. 10 only splits evenly by 2 and 5. That's it. Try to divide 10 by 3, and you get a mess. Try to divide it by 4, another mess. Now think about 60. 60 divides evenly by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. 10 different whole numbers, no remainders, no fractions. For people doing astronomy, trade, and land division, with nothing but their hands and a stick in the sand, that mattered enormously. So the Babylonians built their entire number system around 60, not just for time, for everything. Land surveys, grain measurements, interest on loans, all of it ran on base 60 math, carved into wet clay with a wedge-shaped stylus, dried in the sun, and stored by the thousands. Neugebauer and later researchers cataloged tablet after tablet showing multiplication tables, reciprocal tables, and astronomical predictions, all built on the same 60-based foundation. This wasn't a rough guess made by farmers. This was the working notation of the most advanced mathematicians on the planet at the time. And that system didn't disappear. It got passed to the Greeks, who used it for astronomy and for dividing circles into 360 degrees, itself just 60, multiplied by 6. The Greeks passed it to the Egyptians and later to Islamic scholars, who used it to divide the day into smaller and smaller pieces for prayer times and astronomy. By the time mechanical clocks were being built in medieval Europe, more than 2,000 years after the first Babylonian tablets, 60 was already baked into the sky itself, in how people measured circles, degrees, and time. The clockmakers didn't invent the 60. They just built machines to match a system that was already 3,000 years old, and they built it into gears, escapements, and clock faces that would define how billions of people experience a single day. Here's the first stage of the scenario. Picture medieval European clockmakers instead inheriting a purely decimal tradition, with no Babylonian 60 anywhere in their toolkit. The mechanical clock, one of the most important inventions in human history, would have needed gear ratios built around 10 instead of 60. And 10 is a mechanical nightmare compared to 60. 60 can be divided into gear trains using combinations of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6-toothed wheels, all fitting together in clean whole number ratios. 10 barely gives you 2 clean options. The earliest clockmakers, working with hand-forged metal and no modern tolerances, needed every mechanical advantage they could get. A decimal clock wouldn't have just looked different. It might have been dramatically harder to actually build with 14th century technology. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because humanity did try to replace it, and it happened much more recently than you'd think. In 1793, in the chaos of the French Revolution, the National Convention decided the old world had to go. Not just the monarchy, everything. Weights, measures, the calendar, and yes, time itself. They introduced decimal time, 10 hours in a day, 100 minutes in an hour, 100 seconds in a minute, Clean, rational, revolutionary. Exactly the world we imagined at the start of this video. France actually manufactured clocks for it. Real clocks, with 10 numbers on the face instead of 12, sold to the public, installed in official buildings. For a brief moment, an entire country was living inside the alternate timeline you're picturing right now. It lasted about 17 months. Here's the escalation. It wasn't the math that failed. The math was actually fine. What failed was everything the math had to connect to. Every existing clock in the country was suddenly wrong. Every scheduled trade agreement with another nation, none of which had switched, was suddenly out of sync. Sailors depending on astronomical tables built over centuries around the old system had no equivalent tables in the new one. France wasn't just changing a number, it was trying to disconnect one country from the entire rest of the world's timekeeping, all at once, in the middle of a revolution that already had enough problems. By 1795, the government quietly dropped it. Not because 10 was worse than 60 on paper, because switching an entire civilization's infrastructure overnight, in the middle of chaos, with zero international cooperation, turned out to be close to impossible. But the story doesn't end there, and this is the second stage of escalation. Decimal time actually got a second chance, almost 200 years later, and it came from an unexpected place. In 1998, the Swiss watch company Swatch launched something called Internet Time, dividing the day into 1,000 units called beats, with no time zones at all, so someone in Tokyo and someone in New York would, in theory, be looking at the exact same number at the exact same moment. It was pitched as the timekeeping system for a newly connected, always online world. It had marketing, celebrity endorsements, and real corporate money behind it. It quietly disappeared within a few years, for almost the exact same reason the French system collapsed 2 centuries earlier. Nobody else's infrastructure moved with it. Every airline schedule, every bank, every server, every human habit stayed locked to 60. A better number, launched alone, without the rest of the world switching too, doesn't survive contact with a planet that already agreed on something else. So picture the scenario stretching further. What if it hadn't been revolutionary France, alone and isolated, trying this? What if the whole world had adopted decimal time from the start, the same way it eventually adopted the metric system for length and weight? This is where the math actually starts working against the dream. Because remember what made 60 so useful in the first place? It splits 10 different ways. 100, the number decimal time depends on, only splits evenly 7 ways, by 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25, and 50. That sounds like a lot, until you realize it's missing 3, 6, and 12, the exact numbers that ancient trade, ancient land division, and ancient astronomy relied on most. There's a mathematical name for numbers like 60. They're called highly composite numbers, numbers with more divisors than any smaller number. The mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan wrote an entire landmark paper on them in 1915, showing that as numbers get larger, highly composite numbers become rarer and more mathematically special, not less. 60 sits near the very bottom of that list, one of the earliest, most efficient highly composite numbers in existence. 10 does not. 100 barely improves on it. In other words, the Babylonians weren't just first. They accidentally picked one of the most efficient possible numbers for the job, thousands of years before anyone had the mathematics to prove why it was efficient. So here's the twist. In our imagined decimal world, humanity gets clean, round numbers everywhere else, but time itself becomes clumsier to actually use by hand. Splitting a day into thirds, a task that matters for shift work, for trade, for basic daily planning, stops giving you a whole number. Splitting an hour into quarters gets messier too. The exact convenience decimal time was supposed to deliver quietly, breaks down the moment real people try to divide their day the way they always have. And that's before you even get to the astronomy. The stars don't care about decimals. Earth's rotation, its orbit, its tilt, none of it divides cleanly into any number humans invented. Every timekeeping system, 60-based or 10-based, is really just an approximation layered on top of a universe that was never built for round numbers in the first place. 60 just happened to approximate it in a way that was easier to compute by hand. Now bring it back to today, because this isn't ancient history. It's still running underneath everything you touch. Every GPS satellite in orbit carries an atomic clock accurate to billionths of a second. And every single one of those measurements still gets translated back into hours, minutes, and seconds for humans to actually read. Computers, the most decimal, binary, base anything you want machines ever built, still display the time in base 60, because changing it now would mean breaking global aviation schedules, international shipping, financial markets, and literally billions of existing devices, all at once, everywhere, simultaneously. France tried that in one country, in 1793, with far less at stake, and it collapsed in under 2 years. Swatch tried it again in 1998, with modern technology and global marketing behind it, and it still couldn't hold on. Think about what that actually means. Twice, in completely different centuries, with completely different tools, humans looked at the 60 and tried to replace it with something cleaner. Twice, the replacement lost, not because the new number was worse in theory, but because coordination, at a planetary scale, always beats elegance. Every clock, every calendar app, every train timetable on Earth right now is quietly enforcing an agreement none of us actually made, negotiated by scribes in ancient Mesopotamia who never once imagined satellites, smartphones, or a global economy running on their math. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. It isn't even inefficient. Modern number theory, centuries after the fact, ended up proving the Babylonians accidentally got the math right. 60 isn't a leftover superstition still clinging to your wrist. It's one of the most efficient possible choices, hiding in plain sight on every clock face you've ever glanced at. So when you glance at a clock today, you're not just checking the time, you're looking at a 4,000-year-old decision made by astronomers who never saw a mechanical gear that turned out to be so mathematically efficient that a literal revolution couldn't replace it. Every country on Earth, no matter what number system it uses for money or measurements, agreed, without ever formally agreeing, to keep counting time the Babylonian way. So think about that the next time you check a clock. It never had to be 60 minutes in an hour. History tried something else, on purpose, with an entire government behind it. And in less than 2 years, the old math quietly won anyway.